Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle D'Amico, and I'm the Director of Continuing Education and Public Programs at the NYU SPS Center for Global Affairs, or CGA. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and provide a quick introduction to who we are for those of you who may be new to our community. Since its founding, our goal at the Center for Global Affairs has been to prepare global citizens to make a positive impact in the world. We do this through a variety of activities, including our 2 graduate programs, an MS in Global Affairs and an MS in Global Security, Conflict, and Cybercrime. We also offer a wide variety of professional and personal enrichment continuing education courses in the areas of global affairs and fundraising, and this includes several professional certificates. And of course, we host free public events such as this that expand upon the critical issues and timely topics that we cover in our classrooms. We'll send a follow-up message to all attendees, so please feel free to reach out with any questions you might have. And we've also saved some time at the end of today's conversation for questions from the audience, so please feel free to submit those via the Q&A tool. We are really excited to talk to you today about career opportunities in the growing field of data analytics. We are really delighted to be able to have several of our esteemed alumni join us today. And now I'd like to turn this over to our moderator, Dr. John Kane, Clinical Assistant Professor at the CGA and lead of our Data Analytics Specialization. Professor Kane, the floor is all yours.
Thank you everyone for attending today. It's great to be here with my 3 wonderful former CGA students, Deja Solberg, Michaela Millender, and Marcela Roque. Maybe can I just, before I have each of you introduce yourselves, I'll just say a little bit about what I teach here. So I oversee the specialization in data analytics. I teach courses on analytic skills, applied statistics, and advanced data analysis. And I just wanted to point out that it's sort of surreal for me to even be here hosting something like this, because I would not ever really describe myself as sort of a natural numbers person. I don't even really enjoy math or anything like that. I was just very into political science, social science research, and doing a PhD sort of forced me to have to learn a lot of this data analysis stuff. But I'd say that after about 6 months or a year of doing that PhD, it really changed the way that I thought about things quite a bit. It changed how I approached problems, how I thought about evidence, and I think really for the better. And so eventually that the logic just sort of took hold. And so what a lot of people don't realize when they're first getting into this or thinking about getting into it is it's really just that data is just a very fancy word for information. And the idea is that data analysis is a way of getting meaning out of a large quantity of information that we'd otherwise never be able to understand. So in other words, data analysis allows you to see patterns that you would never otherwise be able to detect. And it allows you also to test ideas in a way that you would never otherwise be able to do. And sort of in a larger philosophical sense, I like to think of data analysis as a way or as something that allows you to measure, investigate, and discover reality itself, right? What's really going on in an objective sense rather than sort of what we might subjectively perceive is going on, right? And so for that reason, I became very passionate about it, and I'm just thrilled to be at the CGA now teaching these types of courses so that I can hopefully really pass on this passion, especially to students that maybe don't start out thinking that that they'd be cut out for something like this, a field like this. With some practice and some time, they often discover sort of how great it is and how many doors it can open in terms of job opportunities. Right. So with that, if I could ask our 3 panelists to maybe just introduce themselves, maybe indicate when you graduated the Center for Global Affairs and what your current job title is now. Deja, maybe beginning with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deja. So I actually just graduated from the CGA this past May. My concentration was international development, humanitarian assistance, and then I did the data analysis concentration with Professor Kane. So currently I'm working as a data analyst contractor for an organization called UPSIA. So it stands for the Association for Professional Continuing and Online Education. So we do most of our research in higher education. So lots of our clients are colleges and universities, and we look at common trends in higher education right now. We do survey research, we write white papers. So we do quite a lot in the field of higher education.
Awesome. Michaela?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Michaela Millender. I'm the Program and Communications Officer at the Soufan Center, which is a think tank in New York City that works on global security issues and issues in counterterrorism. I also graduated with a concentration in international development and humanitarian assistance, like Deja, and I also did the UN and data analytics specializations and graduated in 2021. So that's a little bit about me.
Terrific. Marcela?
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be in this panel moderated for one of the best professors I had at CGA. My name is Marcela Roque. I'm the head of market intelligence at ENGIE, and recently I was appointed as the general director of ENGIE's power commercialization company. I graduated from CGA in spring 2017, so it's been more than 5 years.
Terrific. Awesome. So, you described sort of your job and currently in a general sense. I'm wondering sort of on a typical day, kind of what types of things are you doing for your respective jobs? So what does a typical day sort of look like? Deja?
Yeah, so a typical day looks a bit different for me. It depends. So what we do is all project based. So like I said, our clients are colleges and universities, and we sometimes work with corporate partners as well. So depending on what they're looking for. So for example, right now we're doing a lot of research in alternative credentials. So we might have a project that centers around research in alternative credentials, or a college might want us to look into their programs and see what programs are performing well, which ones have room for growth. And so depending on the project, every day looks a little bit different. We do a lot of surveys. So with surveys, it can last for a few weeks up to a month or two. And so once the survey is finished, I get the survey in a big statistical software, and then I usually will just build out a report. So sometimes that takes anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. And I look at the data, I bring together the key insights, and then afterwards, I really tell a story about what this data means, how our clients can use the data to be advantageous in any way within their higher education departments. And we have meetings with clients as well. We host really big events. We have regional events. We have events all across North America where people from all different colleges and universities come and hear our latest research. So yeah, it's very project-based, which I love. So every day kind of just depends which project I'm working on.
That's awesome. Sounds wonderful. Michaela?
Yeah, so similar to Deja, it also kind of depends on the day, or it depends on the season rather, of what we have in the works in terms of projects. But for me, I kind of think of my role in 3 different buckets of, research. So what are the research projects that we are currently working on? We have sort of different types of streams that we monitor sort of continuously in the realm of counterterrorism and security issues. Particularly for me, I focus on sort of monitoring sort of right-wing populism, extremism, issues on migration, and how, sort of the nexus of migration and issues of security or terrorism. And then we also, I do quite a bit of sort of our programming, whether that be meetings, events that we may have, how are we engaging with various stakeholders, whether they're at the UN or the EU or governments, or other researchers, think tanks, academics, hosting meetings, discussing these issues that we may be researching and writing on. And then sort of the third bucket is communications. How do you get that information out there to the public, to your various stakeholders? Our audience is kind of unique. We're sort of at the crossroads of governments, intelligence agencies, academics, and other think tanks. And so how do we communicate to those different audiences, sort of our research and in what we're seeing and the various issues that we monitor. So with that, kind of specific tasks fall into those three categories.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. Marcela?
Sure. ENGIE is an energy company. We have power plants, solar, wind, cogen, natural gas, and power commercialization company, and natural gas pipelines. So my job is to offer market intelligence services to all these companies within ENGIE. The main activity my team and I do is to forecast the LMPs, which are the power local marginal prices for the short, medium, and long term. This is complex because in Mexico, we have more than 2,500 nodes, and each node has a different price that changes every hour based on supply, demand, and transmission restrictions. So for the short-term forecasting, we are now using statistical methods such as ARIMA, linear regression, and now we're in the process of developing a machine learning model. And for the medium and long term, we use a software called Plexos, where we model the entire electricity system, all the power plants, transmission lines, their capacities, their technical limits, LCOEs, expected fuel prices, the US and Mexican exchange rates, among others. And with this software, we try to replicate the market operator's mathematical dispatch model to predict the prices. And so a typical day entails monitoring the LMPs and natural gas prices, understand the market fundamentals, gathering and cleaning data, reading the news, talk to people from the industry, and understand the regulation.
Wow, that is terrific. And I don't often hear like ARIMA models in normal conversations. That was a nice throwback to some time series regression methods there. Very cool. So curious how panelists or attendees and certainly CGA students might be interested to know, like, how did you come to find this job? Was it just sort of a general search for it? Did you go to particular events? Knowing someone in the field, like, sort of how did you break into it exactly? Deja?
Yeah, so I actually have Professor Kane to thank for this job. I was working as his graduate assistant throughout my last year at CGA. And during the last class of the concentration, advanced data analysis, I think you often get just different data jobs reaching out and sending out open positions. And so he had forwarded an open position, I think, to some of our classmates. And I saw the open position. I was like, wow, this is so perfect. So I applied during my last semester and I ended up getting it. And so it was really nice. I was working for them about 30 hours a week during my last semester, and they were very flexible. And then upon graduation, they extended my contract. And so I've been working with them ever since. And it was really nice graduating and already having that job lined up.
That's terrific. And yeah, that is very nice unintentional plug for yeah, if you take some courses with me,
yes,
you will be sort of in my mind as like, that is someone who's capable of doing this and would do a great job. And now if anything comes across my desk, I'll forward it out to those students. That's great. I'd forgotten that I'd passed along that to you, but terrific. Michaela?
I'll continue the theme. I also ended up in this role because of a professor who passed along the job application. So very thankful for that. But I will say my first job out of grad school was also passed along to me by you, Professor Kane. So I think that was an incredibly helpful tool as professors, as you get to know them, can then know sort of what you're interested in and what your strengths are, and then can sort of more personally recommend opportunities as they arise.
Yeah, so this certainly happens. Part of grad school is not just, I mean, a big part of it is gaining knowledge and skills, right? But another part is you are now in a network of people who know people, right? So you now are connected with people who can potentially connect you to people working in the field, right? So this thing certainly, this type of thing certainly happens. Marcela?
Sure. I think it was thanks to NYU, my experience and networking. I will tell the complete story in a very short way so you understand my path, because this is my fourth job since I graduated from CGA. So before graduating from CGA, I got a job in New York at East Coast Power and Gas through LinkedIn. Then my husband and I moved to Mexico, and within 3 weeks, I had 3 job offers. Those jobs I contacted through LinkedIn, and also I had a personal recommendation for one of them. And I think it was easy for me to find a job mainly for 4 reasons. The first one is that at that time, the electricity market in Mexico had just been liberalized. So there was, and I think there still is, a lack of energy professionals. The second is that the experience I had at an energy company in New York really helped, even though I was there for less than a year. The third is that I sent my thesis as proof of knowledge about the Mexican market. I did my thesis as a guide to invest in the Mexican electricity market. So that really helped as proof of my knowledge. And the fourth, and that I think is the most important, is that to have a master's degree from NYU really put me in a higher level. Because I started directly as the head of market intelligence at CFE Calificados, which is a nationally owned utility. Then within CFE Calificados, I was offered the position of head of pricing, which was data intensive too, because I was responsible of the product creation and pricing strategy of the company, and the P&L depended on me. So the results were amazing, and that success we had was public in the industry. So while I was there, I tried to do as much networking as possible with generators, lenders, and people from the industry. So one of my acquaintances recommended me for the energy director position at a newly created company, Luxem. I took the job. I was there for 2 years. And while I was at Luxem, a friend asked me to talk about the electricity market to some people from Engie. So I agreed. I had a Zoom meeting with them. And after that, the managing director of Engie invited me for coffee. I went. And after 3 months, HR called me to let me know they had the market intelligence position open. I applied and I got the job.
That's just magical. That was borderline magic right there. That's wonderful. And it's a really nice segue. I like you mentioning sort of that you were able to use your thesis as sort of a proof of knowledge about the particular field, which is great. And I often try to mention to my students in advanced data analysis and even thesis students that I oversee that this is a great opportunity for you to have something that you could show to potential employers as, proof of, look, I can do this. I was able to collect this data, analyze it, make these graphs, make these tables, talk about what it's saying, right? It's a tremendous set of skills that can kind of all be contained in one document, which is really nice. So I've certainly had a lot of students mention that they made use of their projects in my class or their CGA thesis or capstone project when on the job market. So that's terrific. And that leads kind of nicely into my next question, which is, how do you, and at the risk of inferring causality, which in social science you have to tread lightly, but how do you think your time at CGA sort of prepared you for the role that you currently have? What do you see as sort of the ways in which CGA helped prepare you for what you're doing now? Deja?
Yeah, so I did the data analysis concentration. So the practical skills that you learn within those courses, it's 3 courses for the concentration, are very leverageable. And so I use them almost every single day. Learning the actual statistical software is really important, but even more than that is understanding the data and being able to tell a story while looking at the data. And so we had a lot of opportunities within the classes to speak about what this data means, more than just the descriptive statistics, but really understanding what the story is telling. And we also got opportunities to present the data, which I think is really important, especially in my role. We have a lot of conferences and events, so we have to become comfortable talking about data in a way that's very digestible to people who might not know data. So I think the data analysis concentration really prepared me for that. And then other courses just within the CJ as well, really practicing research and writing. And you'll see too as well, the data analysis concentration helps a lot within your other courses too, because within the other courses, professors really enjoy getting some data in there when you're able to talk about it in a very digestible and familiar way.
That's terrific, terrific feedback, and truly like warms my heart. It's very much exactly how I see things. I often tell students, like, I could show my 5-year-old how to run a regression analysis. Like, you could do that, but what's most important is that once your software of choice spits out the results to you, you need to be literate, right? You need to be data literate so that you can now understand what this is telling you in words, right? So oftentimes in my classes, I'm always saying that, right, quantitative data analysis is very much about going from words, things like concepts. We might use surveys to measure satisfaction with something. We might be interested in sort of growth of an industry. We might be interested in the degree to which sort of terrorism or right-wing sort of populism is expanding or shrinking or changing nature or something like that. Right? So we're interested in words, but then to actually study it in a systematic way, we have to convert those things into numbers in some form. Otherwise, it's too messy to make sense of all that information. So if we can convert it to numbers, now that opens up doors for the types of analyses that we can do. Anything from descriptive, simple statistics, how often is this thing happening? Right? We could do simple things like that, all the way up to regression analysis and ARIMA models to forecast sort of what will happen in the future based on what has happened in the past, right? So like it runs the gamut. But then after doing all those analyses, you make the final conversion, right? Which is went from words to numbers, but then we have to go back to words again, right? So it's not just about having software spit out a whole bunch of numbers. It's about eventually getting back to a place where we can say what's going on, right? And I love that you mentioned, Deja, this point about that the work you do and the other sort of analysts maybe that you work with, they all get, if you show sort of a regression like table or something like that, they'll understand it, or a matrix of correlations or something, they get it. But very often part of the job involves being able to talk to people who don't fully understand this stuff and trying to take the knowledge that you see in your software and kind of convert it to something that's digestible for a non-quantitative audience. And I certainly try to emphasize that in my advanced data analysis course, for example. You might remember those that took it. Presentations don't just tell me like, here's the regression coefficient equals 0.76. Okay, that's fine. I know what it means, but try to really change the way that you're presenting this information so that you're doing it as though you're speaking to someone who doesn't understand what that means, right? And it's a whole skill in and of itself, being able to write and speak about statistical results that you understand in a deep, mathematical, statistical way, but then being able to talk about it to people that don't necessarily, they're not necessarily using SPSS or Stata or R every day of their lives, right? They don't understand this stuff as well as you do. So that's terrific to hear. Michaela, how your time at the CGA sort of prepared you for what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, without like running the risk of repeating everything that was just said, because I wholeheartely agree. I would also say that sort of through the, the research methods class that, that everyone has to take, very, very foundational in terms of not only how do you sort of research well and sort of know about, whatever it is you're interested in. Also, how do you mechanize sort of these concepts that we're talking about, whether they're, looking at something like terrorism, how do you measure that? What specific thing are you trying to capture and mechanize? And then how do you defend those decisions in terms of capturing that data and then communicating it in an effective way? I think that for me was very, very helpful in terms of, those initial classes we took. And then as you get further into, say, the data specialization is learning how to justify the choices that you're making in terms of why you're measuring what you're measuring, measuring it, and then sort of then communicating that in a way that's digestible to people who may not normally work with data. And I think we underestimate people's levels of understanding when it comes to what numbers are actually communicating, because data is not lying, but people can manipulate data to say certain things. And so learning how to be a good consumer of it is really important. And I think that the courses help you in that to become a better researcher. So I think that's how I've definitely used it in my personal role. Particularly we do larger long-term projects where we have like a longer form policy brief or things like that. But we also have a product that we release every single day that's a bit shorter form. And I say when we're writing these, they're called intel briefs, we incorporate quite a bit of data into what we're doing. And we try to always use data points that we either are collecting ourselves or sort of pulling from different sources. And I would say that the skills that I learned in terms of research methods and also from the data analysis classes are immensely helpful in communicating these things, sort of explaining why this thing is communicating what it's communicating in a short amount of time, which I think can be tough, especially when you want to make it digestible to different audiences, which we're always keeping in mind in terms of, there may not be the same level of understanding with a global audience with different stakeholders. So I think those were some key takeaways, but also completely agree with what was said earlier.
That's great. No, yeah, and you mentioned so many great insights there. Yeah, that that a statistic isn't necessarily lying, right? A correlation coefficient is the correlation coefficient, or but what can often happen is a misinterpretation of what it means, or sometimes an over-interpretation of what it means, right? Like, might see that two things are correlated, and therefore we assume that one thing is causing the other thing. That's a simple example. So that's great. And yeah, everything you mentioned there about sort of the importance of sort of the more, what I'd say, more theoretical, more qualitative, even logical part of data analysis is thinking about what are we really trying to measure, and then what exactly is it that we're trying to get at, and if we use this measure, are we really capturing what we're trying to get at and not something else, right? This is all the words part, and how we convert those words to numbers. That's sometimes a misunderstood part of data analysis that's really, really important, right? The numbers are coming directly from the choices that we make about how to measure things, right? And so you might have encountered some of the same frustration that I do sometimes, where you read reports and all of the stuff about how things were measured is thrown into Appendix R like just all the way down, like in some appendix is like all the details about how things were measured. And to people like me and people like you all now, it's like, that's really important stuff. Like everything in the main report depends upon these choices. So they're really important choices that we often have to make when analyzing data, and have to be transparent about sort of why we're making them, especially to a general audience. That's terrific. Marcela, how about your time at the CGA? How do you think it's maybe helped you with your current work?
I agree with everything you three have said. But in general, I would say that NYU and CGA changed my way of thinking. I think they helped me to have a more structured and organized way of thinking. Also, I developed my writing skills. They pushed me to do high quality papers and presentations. And I also learned how to discern of what is important and what is not important, which I believe is a critical skill. And also classes such as international relations in the post-Cold War era with Professor Levitt and geopolitics of energy with Professor Kazan really made me understand how the world works and pushed me to have an opinion on things based on data, not just to think I believe this and that's it. No, you have to have fundamentals for your answers. And finally, I did the energy concentration. So CGA allowed me to specialize on what I really wanted. I wanted the economics and finance part of energy, and the flexibility that CGA has about the coursework really let me choose the courses that I needed to improve and to prepare for the career I wanted.
It's terrific. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Sort of, I mean, I guess we cover this a little bit, but can you think of any, if you had to name like a couple of very specific skills or pieces of knowledge, maybe even beyond sort of what you learned at the CGA, or it could be something that you learned at the CGA, but some very specific things, skill sets or knowledge that you find yourself using on a very regular basis in your line of work. Deja?
Yeah, so well, first, kind of referencing what I said before, the practical skills, of course, of knowing how to use certain software. And the software can change from job to job, but from what I've realized is once you've really learned one software, learning another one becomes a lot easier. So that is really important. But I would say something that maybe one wouldn't typically assume is I actually use quite a lot of creativity in my data analysis role. So for example, we do a lot of research in higher education. So sometimes what we'll do with the data is we'll segment it. And so we'll create personas of adult learners, who they are, what their interests are. And we tell stories based on what the data says. So that way, when we go to events and we present this data, it's a lot more interesting and a lot more personable. And so I find kind of having that creative flair to it is very interesting side of data that not a lot of people get to see. And it really draws people in and makes them want to read and learn about your research.
That is super cool. I love that. And I love your point too. It's a question that I often get about sort of different software and like thinking like which software is better or something. It ultimately comes down to what you need to do, and probably what software your employer prefers to use. I mean, I've seen places that are doing statistical work mostly in Excel. And I think, Deja, I know you work in SPSS a lot. Other places use R, other places use Stata, other places use Python. There's a lot of different things, but I think you raised a great point with once you learn one, it's not so hard to learn another. And a point I always try to emphasize to students is that the most important thing is the concepts, that you understand what you're trying to do. And then once you know what you're trying to do, changing softwares is just like an inconvenience more than anything else. But it's really not that hard, right? Imagine if you do all of your work on a Mac and then you get hired somewhere where everybody's using PCs. I know me personally, it would be really annoying. Like I would find it very annoying to have to sort of relearn how to do all these little things. Everything would be different. You know, how to do certain things would be different from what I'm used to on my Mac. But at the end of the day, what matters most is I already know all the things that I want to do, right? So how do I connect to Wi-Fi? How do I open up internet and send an email, right? How do I get to different files, right? How do I get to applications? Like I know what I want to do. So now it's just the minor inconvenience of knowing how to do it on a PC as opposed to a Mac, right? That change is nowhere near as important as not knowing the concepts and then having to learn the concepts, right? Someone who has no idea what a computer is, going anywhere to use a computer, right? That's a big change. So not knowing anything about data analysis and then learning data analysis on any software, that's the big change. Then changing to different kinds of software or something, it's annoying, but very doable once you know what you're trying to do, right? That's the most important. Michaela?
Yeah, I would say, you know, hard skills definitely. Research and writing, I think, are two of the big that come to mind that, you know, I think we take for granted that those are incredibly important skills. You know, especially with the amount of content we are, like personally in my job that we're writing or editing a day. And then just, you know, in terms of research, you know, doing good principled research is important. I would say one of the things that, you know, I guess I don't know if it's surprising or just how much I use it is interpersonal relational skills, I think, are immensely important in my job. And I think in this field in general, at least in our corner of the world, in terms of counterterrorism and security, it's pretty small, and so it's really important to build sort of relationships and to not sort of, you know, the hard skills are super important, but also the softer skills of knowing how to work well with other people and collaborate, I would say, is important, as well as just learning to build your, not only your network in terms of trying to find a job, but just building, you know, sort of a network of colleagues as you're working together and disseminating your research or, you know, sort of collaborating with one another on the issues you're working on, particularly in New York, and especially since we engage a lot at the UN. I think that's just kind of an important diplomatic skill, I would say, that I was a little, again, not surprised, but I think I use a lot more than maybe I would have expected.
That's great. Yeah, and I love that, mentioning that at the end of the day, you're working with other human beings, right? And so it helps to just be nice, be friendly, work well with others is a hugely valuable skill and can take you very far in life in a number of ways. So you know, hard skills are super important, right? But working well with others equally, if not more so, important. Marcela.
Sure. I would say my number one is statistical skills. To be able to quickly calculate correlations and other energy related things like load and capacity factors, short run marginal costs. Also, analytical skills in general, like to be able to understand the numbers and quickly identify if there is something wrong or if the data doesn't make sense or if it is correct. Also, to be able to read and understand financial statements. I think it's crucial to be able to summarize and be clear and direct. And in terms of software, currently at my level, I only need Excel, but everyone in the market intelligence team must know R, Python, SQL, and Power BI.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Yeah, those are all popular, very popular software as well for a lot of data science work. That's terrific. And sort of maybe we have a few minutes and then maybe we'll open it up to questions. But I guess could you recommend sort of what courses maybe at the CGA within or even in addition to the CGA, courses, types of training would you recommend that people do if they're trying to sort of break into your field or do work similar to yourself? You know, what should they be taking at the CGA? What should they be mindful of in terms of building a skill set? Deja?
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend the data analysis concentration and take Professor Kane's classes. I took him for all 3 of the courses and it was great. I think the great thing about doing the concentration as well is it's leverageable in many different industries. So I work in higher education, but there's so many other industries, pretty much all industries need a data analyst. So I would say that it's a great skill to have. It's a really good hard skill. You come out of graduation and you feel like you've really learned something tangible and you know how to leverage that into any type of industry. I would also recommend applying for graduate assistant positions. I think it's a really good way to develop relationships with professors and to kind of get more of an insight of what they do on a day-to-day basis and learning about all different things. So I think both of those combined give you a lot of insight and will open up a lot of opportunities for you.
That's terrific. Thank you. Yeah. Great point too about how it often cuts across fields. Sometimes I think some students think that certain concentrations, it makes sense to do, you know, data analytics or something, but other ones it's not really relevant. And I don't know about that. I would say like in any field where you will potentially be making decisions based on information, data analysis is useful, right? And that covers pretty much everything, right? So even in life itself, right? If you make decisions, you want to make those decisions based upon information. And when you are getting a lot of information thrown at you and you need a way to process that information, that's what data analysis is for, right? So, so yeah, I love your point. It's very broadly applicable, regardless of sort of where you might go. There's a lot of places, I'd say increasingly so, that want someone who can read and or generate you know, quantitative information. Yeah, Michaela?
I wholeheartedly agree. And I would also just add that for me, both the UN and the data analytics specializations were immensely helpful in sort of reinforcing the other classes I was taking. I think that just the knowledge that both those sets of things gave me just made me, I think, more knowledgeable in the other areas, whether it be learning to analyze the phenomena that I was interested in my concentration and now sort of in my job. It's really helpful to be able to, again, underestimated skills. This sounds really simple, but like I can read a study and understand it and ask the questions about what were people measuring? Why did they choose those different mechanisms? How does that, you know, sort of, how do I take what they're presenting in terms of my own research and apply it to other things? And then, you know, the UN specialization, I think, was helpful in that regard. Again, that's really applicable to what I'm in. We're very adjacent to the UN. And so those things gave me a lot of really practical skills that then reinforced, you know, the other topics that I was interested in my concentration and now in my job that were very helpful, and I very highly recommend that they're mutually reinforcing. They definitely don't usurp anything in any type of way. And then I also would recommend applying to be a graduate assistant. I was one for Professor Sidhu, and it was super helpful in terms of you know, just getting to connect with different people and in his network, as well as getting some more other practical skills in terms of some of the things we were doing for the UN specialization back when I was in the program and launching a few different things. That was really helpful in terms of my own personal skills.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Marcela?
Okay, for all concentrations, I recommend applied statistics with you and corporate finance. And I would encourage them to even look for after courses that go even deeper. Also, to learn programming skills is a must nowadays. For analyst and specialist positions, I'm only hiring people that know R, Python, or a software like that. And finally, for energy concentrations, I would recommend economics and finance of energy, energy financial modeling, energy deals, electricity markets with Professor Nelson, which it was an amazing class. And I recommend, as I said at the beginning, to focus your thesis on something that will help you demonstrate your knowledge and skills to get a job.
That's great. Terrific advice, Marcela. Thank you. That's wonderful. So I can start opening up to some questions from attendees here. I have a couple that came in. So first question, a good one. Thanks for all the panelists. A question that is there any time you conduct qualitative research, and how do you handle it? So it is, things like open-ended survey questions, other forms of qualitative data that you might come across, and sort of what do you do to make sense of that data? What does that process kind of look like for each of you, if it happens at all? Deja?
Yeah, so for qualitative, we do a lot of surveys. And so some of our surveys do have open-ended questions. For those, it's sometimes a very long process. Sometimes our surveys will have up to 3,000 people. So what we usually do is there's kind of a chain of people. So someone first looks through it, they clean the data, and then we code it very, very slowly and precisely. And then someone else will go through and look over the codes as well. And then the third person will go through again and look over the codes and look over how they're coded, whether or not each question is in the correct coding category, just to really make sure that we're not missing anything. So qualitative does definitely take a few eyes sometimes to make sure that there's no bias and to make sure that everyone is agreeing on these coding categories. But yeah, I do really enjoy the qualitative stuff. It's really interesting because it's a little bit different than the quantitative, and it just adds an extra flair to the project sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah, that's terrific. Yeah, they can complement each other very, very nicely sometimes. You can have some, very informative stats about what's going on a larger scale, and then you can just complement that a lot of times with some great qualitative data that really just seem to be, hitting crucial points to be aware of that sometimes, quantitative analyses might not quite be able to capture or put into words what you might see in qualitative information. So that's terrific. Michaela?
Yeah, I feel like we do work quite a bit with qualitative data, less probably like running our own surveys, but definitely in terms of, for me personally, I read a lot of like survey studies that other people do in terms of informing our research. But then also in terms of, various ways that we are interacting with stakeholders, in our orbit at the UN, at various places, in conversations. I think that definitely lends itself more to the qualitative, as well as I think that although I am a data nerd, I love numbers. I hate math, but I do really enjoy the numbers, because I think it gives you something often very tangible in terms of your research. Often it can be a little dry, and so the qualitative is often really helpful in, I think, as you said, Deja, like giving it a bit of a flair, and maybe giving you a bit more detail that might have been lost in some of the macro level data that we often can be working with in terms of, is this a global data set? Is this a national data set or regional? Sometimes you lose some of that detail. And so the qualitative data can definitely help give you that textural quality, for lack of better words, or flair, that I think is really helpful in terms of then communicating that to people, especially if, numbers is something that they're less familiar with of what it's communicating.
That's terrific. Yeah, sometimes if you're giving a presentation there may be some people in your audience who are, completely unimpressed with a beautiful regression table or, coefficient plot or something that you've made, but they love a good quote, right? Just a good quote from something, right, can really, that could be the thing that sticks with them sometimes, right? So having some ability to analyze both types of data is certainly a strength in a lot of ways. Marcela?
I think qualitative information is really useful also for us because it helps us to select what things we will put into our models to predict prices, especially for medium term and long term. For example, to forecast the LMPs, I have to put into the models all the new power plants that will be added into the electricity system and all the power plants that will be retired. So we have to consider all the times that the time that it will take new power plants to come online, and also how's the economy, how will the demand behave, and other things that may help us select the assumptions that we will have in our model.
That's terrific. Yeah, and you mentioned also you do a lot of reading of news and sort of current events that can inform what you do as well, right? So that's terrific. So another question. A quick one just for the three of you. Were you full or part-time in the program? And how long sort of did it take you to complete the program? Deja?
Yeah, I was a full-time student, and so it took me 4 semesters, so 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Michaela?
I'll be quick. Same.
Same.
Me too.
Great.
The same.
Okay, so all full-time. Okay, that's an easy one. So 4 semesters, that's very common. But we do have, I don't know what the exact breakdown is, but we certainly do have a lot of part-time students as well. At least half, I would imagine, if not more. So another comment from Maria. Thank you for this amazing conversation. I'm curious to know how is the process of applying to jobs in general, but in this case, specifically in data analytics from an international student perspective. Are these skills truly a differential factor? What can we expect from these highly competitive processes? Any particular organizations that normally hire international students that you know of? So lots there, but did you see, I don't know which of you are international students or not, but applying to jobs in the US, I mean, do you have any reflections on being an international student and how that sort of factored into your job searches and job applications, job interviews? And feel free to answer whoever is international. I don't actually know.
I am international. I'm from Mexico. It was tough. I believe New York is the hardest place to get a job, but I really recommend to make your CV as perfect as possible, because when you apply to a job, also like 3,000 people apply for the same job. So what HR does is that they have a software where they just scan your resume, and if it's like the margins are smaller than I don't know what measures, and if it's longer than 1 page and things like that, they get discharged, eliminated. So your CV must be perfect, and you can go to the careers office at NYU and they help you to write it perfectly, and also to have the correct measures. Also, I recommend to have an elevator speech. Is that in 11 seconds or something like that, the time that an elevator's ride lasts, you must be able to say who you are, what do you want to do, and what you can offer to the organization. And finally, to have your LinkedIn page perfect, like very organized, with a subject that really calls to the employer, and with a very concrete summary of what you want to do and what you can offer to the organization, and apply to jobs through LinkedIn, and also try to figure out who is the employer and contact them directly through a LinkedIn message. That really helps, and also to network. Like if someone can recommend you, for example, if you see that the employer, you and the employer have a common connection, you can contact your connection. Hey, do you think you can recommend me for this position, and things like that, and that really helps too.
Terrific, wonderful advice there. Thank you so much, Marcela, for all of that. Anything to add, Michaela or Deja? No.
Marcela said it perfectly.
Okay, yeah, that's outstanding advice. And I had no idea about that companies were using software to say like, oh, your margins are, less than 1 inch on each side, so therefore you must not be a good candidate. So it's really important to know. So stopping by the careers office is a great strategy there. So I mean, in the last couple of minutes, I don't see any other questions. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to throw them out, and I'll ask. But otherwise, we could just end on sort of a happy note of, I'd just like to know, sort of, if you have to put it into an elevator pitch, if you will, what do you like best about your job? It's great to see all former students, and I'd love to know just sort of, what do you like best? What's your favorite part about what you're currently doing? Deja?
Yeah, well, I think one, it's just you get insights onto things that people might not know yet. So doing research and data, I'm the first one that gets to look at the data before anyone else knows. So it's kind of like you get the keys, the secrets before everyone else gets them. So I think having those insights is just really interesting. It keeps the job really interesting. And then just something that is an added benefit is my job personally is remote, and I have flexibility to travel wherever I want, to move around. And so this summer I was living in Spain, and I work full time for the company still. I know not every job does that, but I know a lot of data jobs can be remote potentially. So if that's something you're interested in, yeah, it's definitely a great thing, a lot of flexibility. And yeah, I really like the project base. It keeps things interesting.
Super cool. That's great. Michaela, favorite part about your job?
Yeah, hard to pick, but I would say two things that are my favorite is, number one, I personally love getting to write. And so I think just the frequency with which we're putting out analysis and writing is for me one of the things I really enjoy, particularly the breadth of which we are writing on. Security is a really, you can go in a lot of different directions in terms of global security and terrorism issues. And so that's really one thing I enjoy. And the second thing is just being located in New York. I think we have the advantage of getting to take advantage of being in a place where we often get to be a convener with member states at the UN, with UN entities and other sort of the third UN in terms of civil society groups that are engaging in that space. And that's a really cool, I think, unique aspect to what we're doing, particularly in New York.
That's great. Terrific. And Marcela?
I love that every day is different. The energy markets are constantly changing. Therefore, we are constantly analyzing what has happened, how this could impact NG's businesses, and try to foresee events to make smart decisions based on data.
Wonderful. Very, very nice. Very succinct. You've been working on your elevator pitches, I see. You're very, very succinct. That's terrific. So thank you. Thank you to everyone. I don't see any other questions. So I think we covered all our bases, Michelle, unless anything came to you your way. But otherwise, yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to all three. It really, truly warms my heart so much to see you all having gone through the CGA courses with me, other data related courses and courses that are related to your field. And then to see you come out on the other side doing really, really great, important work and enjoying the work that you do so much. So it's just great to reconnect with you all. And I really hope that this was helpful for those watching. If they're interested in breaking into data analytics at all, I think that all three of you gave some really great insights about, although you're doing all very different work, each of you, it's very obvious how data analytics is playing a role in each of your day-to-day lives. So thank you so much for sharing today.